One. And we're live with Ron Bazar. Ron is CEO and co-founder at toothpicks International. It's not his first company. He's also an author, Sleep Secrets, the owner of naturalprostate.com, arbutusarts.com, living on beautiful islands in Beach. I would guess it's Cortes Islands. So clean innovation. I was like slow keen, but it's so clean innovations. Harvard Business School entrepreneurship studies, also studied to McGill, one of my favorite universities. And yeah, today we're going to talk about Tasty Picks, his background, health, and everything in between. This podcast is presented to you by podpire.com. If you want to start your own podcast and monetize it through YouTube AdSense, sponsors, and lead generation, go to podpire.com. You have a free ebook there and a masterclass if you want to accelerate your podcast learning. Ron, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Great to meet you, Charles, fellow Montrealer. I've been in business since I was probably 8 years old, starting cleaning and shoveling walks from snow in Montreal when we used to have a lot of snow there, all the way up to been in the water business, been in the alternative energy business, wood stoves and skylights, introduced skylights to North America, brought ginseng to North America in the mid-70s. No one had heard about ginseng. Was in China in 1976 when Mao was still alive and everybody wore a Mao suit. And the only method of transportation other than the limousines for the leaders was black bicycles. And I've been put out of business many times by different governments, from the Quebec government, the Canadian federal government. They actually seized 10,000 of our books that we had just published called Ginseng, the Root of Life, and burnt them, seized them. We didn't have money for the lawyers. A few years later, the U.S. Food and Drug banned the importation of our product and killed that business. I've been put out of business by the federal government in Canada for a product, mattresses. I was in the futon business when that became very popular in the 1980s. And they wanted them to be fire retardant because if you smoked a cigarette, the cigarette would cause the mattress to go up in flames. So they wanted to put chemicals in the mattress rather than to take the burning agents out of the cigarettes, which was the real problem. Natural tobacco goes out if you don't puff on it. But commercial tobacco, of course, they put burning agents in it. So you light it, put it in the ashtray, and forget about it. You need another cigarette. So the government, in its insanity, does many crazy things. And I was put out of business another time out of this. So I've been through the mill. I've had successes. I've had failures. And my latest business is a simple product. It's a flavored toothpick, which now is becoming quite popular. And the beautiful thing about these toothpicks is they're made out of a different kind of wood called basswood, which is a little softer than the hard toothpicks. And they come in what's called a comb style, which you can see here. You don't have to take them out of the pack. Basically, you break one off at a time from the corner, from the edge like this. And it's a very thin, tapered toothpick. And this happens to be an orange flavor. They come in mint and cinnamon as well. They're great for freshening your breath and obviously for cleaning your teeth after meals. And there's a trend right now. There's quite a few companies worldwide now starting to sell flavored toothpicks. Most of them are pointy and strong. The wood's is actually dangerous because if the wood is too hard, it can put pressure on your teeth. So there's a lot of advantages of ours. And one of the wonderful things you can do, this is like a matchbook pack from yesteryear. These can be customized for restaurants and hotels and so on. So that's the big market that we're just starting to go after. So it's like a healthy matchbook giveaway, and it's good for virtually all ages.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I'd be a customer of yours. I'll order some when I'm back in Canada. My wife doesn't love them though, because she can't kiss me when I have these in my mouth. I would guess it's good for smokers as well, right? It's
Yeah.
like not taking a cigarette out. Is it good for helping with addiction?
Well, obviously, because part of the addiction is the tactile stimulation of taking the ritual of taking something out of a pack, putting it into your hand, and then the oral and stimulation. So it really can be a very useful tool if you're serious about quitting.
Right. I want to talk before we dive into that one about like the government putting you out of business, which is probably my favorite stories on this podcast. So my first business was a nootropic in Canada. It was called Velux, and it was Health Canada approved. We did studies on it. It was neuroprotective. Health Canada gave us claims, which we really much liked. Helps with memory, helps with energy, helps with yada yada. But obviously, these weren't super scientific, right? So it's like if the government wants to protect people, but I think they're overprotective, right? So what's your stance on the Canadian and U.S. Health Canada and the FDA on if they're overly protective or if they're actually succeeding at their mission?
Well, as RFK would say, a lot of these agencies are corrupted by large businesses with vested interests. So obviously, in the case of putting harmful chemicals in a mattress that you lie on for 8 hours a day, every night, I should say, when they could just take the burning agents out of the cigarettes and solve the problem instantly. That's to me a glaring example of insanity, exposing people to toxic chemicals needlessly when the real culprit is the cigarette and the cigarette manufacturers. In the case of ginseng, they burnt these books, 10,000 books, to educate people about this new herb that no one had heard of from China. We introduced ginseng to North America, and once we printed the books, we didn't have the money for the lawyers to fight them. So
Right.
it was like a SWAT team, it was all yellow tape around. It was in the basement of my house, all these boxes they were unloading into the van. It's like a crime scene. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. And I mean, I had ginseng or nootropic. It was one of my favorite adaptogens and still is up to this date. Like you take ginseng, you feel it, right? It's like
Yeah.
ginkgo. It's an essential for the brain. Bacopa as well. So what was your react? Yeah.
So it's the king of herbs in China. It's the emperor had exclusive rights to the wild ginseng that they harvested. And believe it, I don't know if you know this, just a quick aside, the biggest trade in the 1800s, 17 and early 1800s out of Quebec was ginseng sent to China.
Canadian ginseng, right?
Canadian ginseng.
What's the difference between both?
Panax quinquefolium is Canadian, North American ginseng. Panax ginseng is the Asian one. The difference is Panax quinquefolium is good to use in the spring. So they had different uses for it in terms of, and they would boil them up in a special ginseng cooker, which was a pot with a sealed lid that would go inside a pot of water, and you would boil it up for hours. That was part of what we put in our book, was how to prepare this herb. So I mean, just nuts that the government would kill you for this kind of thing. So my take on it, we don't need the government for something that is proven natural medicine for thousands of years is safe and effective.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you react to that as an entrepreneur once they literally like burn your business? How did you get back on your feet? And how did you also make sure not to keep that resentment into you so that it would burn in your own hands and burn it even further?
Well, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to bounce back from setbacks. If you don't have any setbacks, either you're very, very lucky, or it still may come to you you never know from where. I mean, you can be a giant company. Internet, Netscape was the king of the internet 20 years ago, and no one knows what Netscape is anymore. They brought the browser to you in the world. So, any company can be vulnerable. You got to bounce back. I laugh at the stories now. They're painful when they happen. There's no question about it. You go bankrupt from stuff like this, it hurts.
Right. And which one, talking about the victory side of things, which one was the most successful for you financially?
Well, the sleep business was very good while it lasted, but you know, that move to take what was a natural, healthy product and have to make it unhealthy by dousing it in chemicals really killed that business. It was also the timing of the 1987 stock market crash, which you won't remember, but it was the biggest stock market crash since the 30s. And overnight, we had a venture capital deal that was to sign on October the 21st, 87 for $1 million to expand our business. And October 19th, 87 was when the stock market crashed. And of course, everything changed. And so the venture capital deal, they didn't have money anymore. That didn't happen.
And the sleep business, a mattress business, there was Casper that had some financial difficulties as of late. Why do you think that is?
I don't know who they are, Casper.
Casper, they popularized mattresses at scale. So they tried to be the Warby Parker of mattresses, which is, yeah, you can order the mattress at your door, you can test it, you can return it. They've got like really good prices, they've got financing and all, but why do you think the sleep business was so successful in your time? Was it because there wasn't much comfortable mattresses?
Because we weren't selling mattresses, we were selling good sleep.
I like that.
So we had mattresses, we had cotton sheets, silk sheets, wool covers, wool mattress pads, wool pillows, alpha pillows, which was a specialty pillow made of buckwheat hulls that the Japanese had used for thousands of years because it's really adjustable for your neck and head. We customize it for North American needs and tastes. So when someone walked in, we never talked about what mattress you need, what problems are you having with sleep, how can we help you with that? So unfortunately, there's still a gap in the market for a company like there's Sleep Country Canada, which is the biggest in Canada, but they focus on mattresses. It's not about all the aspects of what requires a good sleep. And tonight you're talking about blue light from our gizmos that kills our sleep capability and makes it very difficult to fall asleep and have restful sleep because we're exposed to so much blue light. So if I had a chain of sleep stores now, I would be focusing on things to do like blue blocking glasses at night and how to minimize the effects of the EMFs that we're all exposed to.
Right. I had on my podcast last week a cool entrepreneur. He has a camera for parents to have nannies monitor their children's while they sleep and only wake up the parents when there's an urgency, right? Do you see potentially in that one?
Well, if it's close to the bed and it's got radiation coming out of it, EMFs, I would never do that with a vulnerable. The brains of children are much thinner, and so the electromagnetic radiation they're exposed to penetrates far deeper. You can look at studies of that. There's thousands of them that show this. Of course, again, here's another industry that we're all addicted to, is it's transformed society. But if we had a true regulatory body, they would say you must come up with devices that do not, it's not the heat that comes off. The test they use is for the amount of heat. It's not that, it's the pulsed radiation that's coming at thousands of flickers per second. We've never been exposed in history to that kind of radiation. So it's a billion times more in the last 20 years than ever in the history.
Interesting. Same philosophy on that Aura ring here that calculates your sleep, and that iWatch here. Potentially not good.
Potentially not good. You would there. There are health practitioners that actually can see the auric field of the body. We're an electromagnetic being, so we radiate out energy from our body. And so that's when you're interpersonally, you can feel when someone's lying to you just by their energy, you know, subconsciously, for instance. So there's people who can see the effects of some of these devices, and some of them are positive in a certain area of the body for a while, and people express wonderful benefits. But over time, it starts affecting another area of the body, and they become sicker than when they began using it. So I would recommend being very careful of anything that's emitting constant radiation.
Interesting. Yeah, getting me to think here because I studied EMFs, but for example, before getting to sleep, one of the best thing that I'm doing nowadays is reading Wikipedia. It's always about like give and take, right? Like me, I think it's just an overactive brain, so I'm willing to have my cell nearby and emit these pulses than to have Wikipedia in my hands. Maybe I could have an EMF protector on my cell. Not sure the efficacy of that. Have you researched that?
Well, again, it's the same issue I just described. There are, you know, the best device is putting it in a sleeve, a Faraday bag that has at least one side protecting you from the radiation. So, you know, I've actually written about this. I never published the book, you know, because it keeps needing to be updated with all the devices that are out there. But many of these devices are actually very harmful. You got to be very careful with them. I would recommend getting a paperback book and read that at night, rather than a Wikipedia entry that exposes
Right.
radiation. And a lot of people are going to think you're nuts because they don't feel anything. But there are people who feel it, and they walk into your home, if you have Wi-Fi on, they'll feel it right away and they'll get headaches. So they're like the canary in the coal mine, warning of a potential danger. Other people may take 20 years for it to manifest.
Right, and there's proven research, placebo vs non-placebo on that.
Tons, but you're up against
Tons.
probably the biggest industry in the world right now.
Yes.
So the vested interest is, don't worry, it's safe and effective.
Yeah, and that's pretty bad, right? Like that's the ugly side of capitalism, which we need to fight against.
Well, it's not capitalism, that's oligarchy. There's a difference. So it's
Well,
not.
it's extreme capitalism, oligarchy. Yeah, that's a keyword that I love to use. It's funny because U.S. uses the oligarch keyword a lot to describe Russians, right? Russian oligarchs, their ultimate enemy. But
Yeah.
if we look closely, there's a bunch of oligarchs also in the U.S. Most specifically.
All the agencies are captive.
Right.
So
And yeah, there's
definitely
interesting stuff happening politically, but yeah, let's not get too much in that. But I want to follow up on your own regimen right now. I'm not sure how old you are. You still look like youthful and with energy. So, what's your day-to-day look like? What's your diet, your fitness routine? How do you increase your lifespan and longevity nowadays?
Well, I'll be 77 in a few weeks, just to give some
pretty good.
perspective.
Yeah.
So I do 7-minute exercise. If you look it up on, I do that about 3 times a week. It takes 9 minutes to do. It's really highly intense, but that keeps me fit. I also do certain kinds of stretching exercises, and breathing is the most important exercise of all, is nasal breathing. If you're breathing through your mouth, even when exercising, you're doing yourself a disservice. There's a great book called Body, Mind, and Sport. It was a classic book by an Ironman triathlete who learned about proper nasal breathing in a 100-mile race, where Whitey at the end of the race collapsed. This was in upstate New Mexico, where the native Indians were running, and they get to the finish line and they would laugh and joke, whereas Whitey collapsed and can barely stand or anything. He said, what the hell are they doing? And he put, they were breathing in and out through the nose. And it's a very powerful way to breathe properly. And many people are breathing through their mouth very shallowly, and that has a huge negative impact on the body. So breathing is something that I learned about proper breathing about 30 years ago, and it served me incredibly. I play ultimate frisbee. It's one of the things I love doing once a week. I go hiking here. I swim a lot. In the summer, I wish I were thick enough in body that I could handle the cold better. But so that's probably, and food, you asked about food. I grow a lot of my own food, actually, vegetables and fruit, but I eat a diet of grass-fed meat, some fish, not a lot, because there's a lot of toxins now in the waters. And
Even where you are?
well, there's a lot less here, because the oysters are really quite clean here because we're in the middle of Vancouver Island. So we get washed by a lot of the fjords mixing into the seawater. So some of our oysters are sold all over the world. They're some of the best in the world here. But so I would say that diet, the food you eat, and exercise and sleep are, the crucial for it. But the most important thing is your headspace, and what's your purpose? Why are you an entrepreneur? And, you have to look at some of these businesses that sell horribly toxic products and don't care. When I'm talking about, whether it's pharmaceuticals or for me.
Coca-Cola.
Pardon me?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, yeah. Coca-Cola, there you go. I mean, it would be hard for me to be producing a product that I knew was directly harmful to people.
What's your purpose nowadays? Like, what do you wake up with in mind on a daily basis?
Well, Tasty Picks for me is a wonderful business because it's a healthy product. And I've had because as a kid, I was a sugar addicted kid. I always had money hustling, as shoveling walks and collecting bottles, and I instantly convert my cash into sugar.
A valuable commodity.
Yeah, I would have chocolate bars and milkshakes and gum, and while they were making my milkshake on the counter back in the 50s, they had sugar cubes on the counter for the coffee. So I would load those up in my pockets, right, from there. So I had horrible problems with my teeth and mercury fillings that no one knew about back then, how toxic those are. So I'm very happy to have a product that's healthy, and I'm going to start a blog about dental health, and because oral health and physical health begins with the mouth.
Yep.
What we eat and how our microbiome is, and so it's connected. So a product like this, and my business partner is my godson. And I was involved, his father, we were involved in the cellular business back in 88 when cell phones were like a brick. They were actually called a brick. And this was in Beverly Hills. And people had the antenna out of the back of their car to say, oh, I'm a big shot. I can afford a cell phone that costs thousands of dollars. Well,
Yeah.
we partnered with probably at the time the world's best designer of small scale integrated circuitry. And he had come up with a product that sold millions. Was called a pocket CB, that was the size of a package of cigarettes at the time when CB radios were huge. And so we had him design a phone that would be like a flip phone way back then when these were bricks. The problem is he had been burnt in between by some venture capitalists. And when we went to bring the venture capitalists that we found to show them this new product, he bolted. He was a genius. He could design the factories that would make the chips for the phone. So sadly, that I would have been a phone mogul selling high EMF devices around the world.
Destiny, what a weird thing. And yeah, I was about to ask you about like your community, because you're very advanced in health stuff, right? And sort of an alien for many, like you're serial entrepreneur, right? You have a community in BC, which I guess are more health conscious. Like, who do you hang out with, or are you an alien to most?
Well, there's not a lot of people. A lot of healthy people live on the island. I mean, it's part of the lifestyle here. Everybody has gardens and we have a natural foods co-op that I helped found and was on the board for several years during the 2008 financial crisis. But there's not a lot of people directly here that even know my full background because, I'm an odd bird. And so I've always loved wood. So I have a wood business that it's like a hobby business. I make these wood utensils out of a local wood called the arbutus tree. And it's a beautiful wood, and that keeps me healthy. Like yesterday, I brought a tree in, and to bring a tree in from the bush, you're carrying this. It's so dense, the wood, it doesn't float in water. So moving and lifting and carrying that it gets you in shape.
So how much kilograms is that?
How many kilograms?
Yeah.
Well, it's just a very dense wood when it's green. When it dries, unfortunately, it cracks a lot, so nobody can make furniture or things out of it. But for my usage is making small utensils for cooking and so on. So, which I love doing.
I thought you'd bring a tractor.
I cook all my meals. I make my own bread. I make my own yogurt. I eat a lot of raw milk and dairy.
Do you feel you've accomplished most of what you wanted for yourself in this life at 77?
No, I mean, I could walk away from this business right now and forget about it. All my other businesses had debt, and that was a terrible problem to have debt. While you're trying to get venture capital, and even this business, I've gone after venture capital. There's no debt in the business, but it's a toothpick. They don't get excited. There's no AI about it. But the reality is, once this is a product that can be used and reused, and it's a worldwide brand. It's going to be. It's on Amazon right now, Canada, US. You can find it. I would love the business to be successful for my godson, who's 26, 27 now, who's worked a lot to help make this happen. He's the tech side of the business. Everything you see in it's all been done with his expertise. But for me, it's play. But I have to balance, the cost of launching the business and keeping it going. But I think for any new entrepreneur out there, you can't get it too attached to your quote baby. There's times in a place where maybe your idea isn't as good. Like, watch Dragon's Den. There's some crazy products that come on there. And sometimes the dragons can be a little ruthless and tough. They're a little less so now than they used to be 10 years ago. But sometimes they'll say, that product is not a scalable product. And, strategically, people need to understand what the real potential of their product is, not theoretical potential, but real potential. Is there a market? What kind of feedback are you getting? So I don't know if I answered your question, but I'd love this business to be successful because I think it's a great product and it would be helpful for people's oral health.
Love it. Well, yes, you answered many questions today. You dropped a lot of pieces of wisdom. Where can people find out more about you, Ron?
Well, I guess the best place is tastypicks.com. Drop an email, on our contact page.
Thank you. That was Ron Bazar and Charles Cormier for